Does music scare you? We use music to make us feel happy or sad, or relaxed or inspired. But some music can elicit a fear response so intense that you feel like you've just been placed in the middle of a scene from a horror movie. Sometimes, music can scare the out of
So how does someone go about writing music that can scare us? How do they use the tools that we have in music such as pitch, volume, speed, arrangement, and texture to manipulate us into feeling fear? The creative use of pitch is one of the most common ways a composer can elicit fear. By having many instruments play different pitches or notes at the same time, often notes that don't traditionally sound nice together, they can create a cacophony of sound that we immediately associate with fear. High-pitched notes are also used to mimic the sound of someone screaming or shrieking in fear. Speed or tempo is another great tool in a composer's toolbox for creating intensity and anxiety through music. Sometimes a slow, brooding melody can create a sense of impending doom. A fast-paced piece of music can make you feel like you are being chased. Arrangement, or what you might call instrumentation or texture, can be the difference between a beautiful melody and a terrifying one. Some composers use thick, dense textures with lots of instruments playing at the same time. Others have done the opposite and used a very simple and scaled back texture to elicit fear in a different way. The use of dynamics in music is another crucial tool that can be used to manipulate our emotions. This is perhaps the most relatable tool because it is one that we use in our everyday lives outside of music.
So, what are dynamics? Motion, variation, volume, contrast, movement, intensity, range, highs, lows, and everything in between. Humans are dynamic beings. We move and adapt and ebb and flow. Generally, we change the way we speak and interact with others to match a situation. Trying to socialize at a loud party, we raise our voices. Trying to soothe a crying baby, we soften our volume. Maybe we even sing quietly. Trying to support someone during a particularly emotional moment in therapy, a gentle, calm, and quiet voice is usually the most intuitive approach. Trying to make a point in the heat of an argument, up goes the volume. Dynamics may refer to volume, but can also refer to affect, the way we express ourselves, not only with words or sounds, but with body language. Humans are dynamic in that we use our whole selves to express what we feel, what we think, and how we react. Flailing arms, bowing our head, shrugging our shoulders, raising our eyebrows. There are countless ways in which humans can say what we feel and show what we mean. Whether it's through the volume of our speech, the movement of our eyes, the gestures in our bodies, or the texture and timbre of our voices, humans are dynamic, and we reveal ourselves through adapting to the range of emotions and experiences that life brings us. Composers also use dynamics in their musical writing as an important tool in eliciting emotions like fear.
Composers use dynamics in music much the same way that we use our voices. In classical music, composers indicate the volume that they would like you to play by using Old Italian terms like forte, meaning loud, and piano, meaning soft. These can be modified with other words like mezzo, meaning half, or adding the suffix issimo, which means more. So our typical dynamic range can move from pianissimo to fortissimo. Some composers get carried away with the issimos. Composers were generally happy to use these dynamics in the way that you'd expect. Loud, soft, echoes, gradual volume changes, and things that were generally pleasing to the ear. Along comes Beethoven, and he changed everything by adding a word in front of many of his dynamics. Subito, which means suddenly. Beethoven became known for his frequent use of subito dynamics. Subito forte, or suddenly loud, subito piano, suddenly soft. The dynamic range in classical music, meaning the difference in volume from loud to soft, is huge. That's part of why composers commonly use dynamics as a tool to manipulate our emotions. If you listen to current pop music, there is almost zero dynamic range, and this has a lot to do with modern production techniques and trying to stand out by being the loudest song on the radio. It's not necessarily a bad thing, it's just the style of our times. All you have to do is look at a quick waveform of a Beethoven symphony compared to the #1 song on the top 40 charts as of today.
Center of attention, you know you can get whatever you want from me.
You can see why Beethoven was so fascinated by subito or sudden dynamics. He was interested in expanding the dynamic range of his music and keeping his listeners engaged by changing dynamics suddenly, keeping the audience guessing what might come next. I think that Beethoven was actually the original creator of the jump scare, not John Carpenter or Wes Craven or Alfred Hitchcock. Today we are featuring a movement of Beethoven's piano trio in D major, nicknamed The Ghost. Now, he didn't name it that. That happened years later by another composer who was studying the piece. We now think that this trio may have borrowed material Beethoven initially meant to be used for Shakespeare's spooky tragedy Macbeth. This trio has 3 movements, and the middle movement, the slow, haunting movement, is the one that is commonly associated with this idea of the ghost. The first movement, on the other hand, is fast, in a bright major key, and has nothing to do with ghosts. Or so you may think. If you listen carefully, you'll hear 4 very hollow-sounding notes that pop up a couple of times, that are so oddly out of place from the rest of the movement. Now, this is no coincidence. I definitely think this is the ghost knocking on the door, foreshadowing the second movement. And perhaps Beethoven is trying to distract us, lull us into a false sense of security and happiness, and along the way he uses his now famous subito dynamics to give us a jump scare here and there, and make sure we're all wide awake and ready for the ghost stories that are to come later.
To perform today's piece, it's a pleasure to introduce the Bedford Trio, a Toronto-based chamber group who has been performing together since 2016. Here to perform the first movement of Ludwig van Beethoven's Piano Trio in D major, Opus 70 No. 1, The Ghost, first movement, is the Bedford Trio, featuring Alessia De Simino on violin, Yang Sui on piano, and Andrew Ascenzo on cello. If you'd like to see the full performance of the Ghost Trio, it will be linked at the end of the video and in the description below. We leave you with the words of the great Vincent Price. It's as much fun to scare as it is to be scared.